My name is Mona Washington. I am a playwright. I have also been trained as an attorney. Maybe 20 years ago, I became really serious about my writing. I think it's the best thing that I can do for the world and for myself.
My first question for me would be, how did you experience this whole pandemic, and especially thinking about the beginning when this wave somehow came from the east over Europe towards the US? How was it for you?
But what I find incredibly disturbing is that I think it reveals American individualism, ersatz individualism, run amok. You have people saying things that are just not scientifically based, including politicians. And I think, most Americans don't understand herd immunity, and they don't understand it because I think our education system has really gone downhill. People that explicitly and proudly proclaim that they will not wear a mask, they sound crazy, but I understand it here in America. It's the same people who say, oh, I refuse to get my children vaccinated because this is America. And so, the scabs are being torn off of some really horrible wounds that many of us have seen and lived with, particularly activists, and I do a lot of political groundwork. But just the sheer ignorance that has been displayed, bottom up, top down, is very troubling. It's like the perfect storm of America being revealed at the same time, scientifically, as is being taken down ideologically. And for people of color, I know, a lot of white people say, oh, I didn't know Trump was so racist. No one, no friends or family, we're not surprised. It's not pleasant, but we're not surprised. So instead of saying, oh, Trump, he's becoming more and more racist, it's been here. He's just making it more acceptable once again. And with the pandemic, even the stories and the narratives that you see on television, to me, disproportionately show white people. The pandemic is affecting people of color physically and financially and emotionally, I think, more so than the average white American. But you don't see that.
Very important for me to learn from you. Why is that so? Possibly it's very obvious, but I'd like to know, because that's a crucial point I hear in other interviews as well. White
supremacy is one of the major ideological foundations of Western society. And that's why you hear it throughout. You can hear the same comments from many people of color ground up all over the world, because look, we're living in a world where some people in West Africa buy bleach cream, where some Asian people stay out of the sun because they want to be light. That's all part of the same structure. From day one, you have found that racism has been used to divide lower income whites from lower income blacks. So, for example, a president said, LBJ said that in the 60s, he said, the greatest trick the Republicans ever did, I'm paraphrasing, was to get the average white man in the South to think that the lowest white man is better than the best black man. So in terms of class, if you talk to a lot of white Americans, it's almost like their identity is built on a negation of mine. This, again, is nothing new. Now we're starting to see voter suppression efforts, which has always been the case. My grandfather, who was a sharecropper in South Carolina back in the early 1900s. When he went to vote locally, one of the white people at the poll said that he had to guess how many jelly beans, candies were in a jar before he could vote. So different now, but still, all of these voter suppression efforts, slowing down the post office, it's part of the same beast, evolved. And you know, for me, and I think I discussed this with you quite a bit, even when the newscasters are talking about the pandemic, or for example, Kamala Harris being picked as vice president, they say things like, oh, she was picked because she's Black. Or this is the first time someone has been picked because they were Black in the past, or something like that. Instead of talking about racism and gender and saying, the reason this is a first is because America is so still incredibly racist and sexist. You know, getting past essentialism is something I think that most Americans don't want to do, right? So when you have Donald Trump right away going into the racism and saying, oh, it's a Chinese virus, it's a Chinese virus, he really knows how to sort of tickle the fear and the racist leanings of many white Americans. So then it becomes a Chinese virus. Personally, even I can feel, and my friends can feel, and this is people of color across gender, across class, feel that whites are much more aggressive now, which they are, in a negative way, much more likely to be extremely rude, to feel empowered to tell you what you should and should not do in public, and they don't know you. I don't hear and see enough about them, people working in the jobs that are often the first to go, marginalized workers, people that work in restaurants and blue collar jobs, things like that. That's my take on it, and I think a lot of my friends would agree with me. Historically, white women in this country have not been reliable allies with people of color for a lot of different reasons. I mean, you know, we're oppressed, they're oppressed as well, but they also enjoy privilege. So, you know, many of them want to talk about sexism, but they don't want to talk about white privilege and racism. So, you know, now you have the terms Karen, you know, these white women who just, and that's their power. They can say, oh, that Black man, oh, look, he was trying to hurt me. It's gone on forever. I have a cousin, an older cousin, now deceased, but in the South, a white woman found him attractive. He did not find her attractive. This is in the 1940s. And they threatened to lynch him because she said he did something to her. But her way of feeling powerful was to kind of, you know, point at my uncle and the family. We had to get him out of town the same night, that night when she started accusing him. So it hasn't changed. I also think the focus has been cisgender. Transgendered people are being beaten to death, marginalized. I hear a conflation sometimes between sort of like sympathy and, you know, normative heterosexuality. It's sort of, you know, it doesn't escape me as a cisgender woman that it seems like I have to go out of my way when I'm reading quote unquote African-American publications for people of color. They are disproportionately focusing on heterosexuals.
Yeah.
And so you know, part of it is self-awareness and not being in denial. And, you know, I have privilege as a heterosexual woman and being good looking. So in my lifetime, I think next to 9/11, this has been the most sort of disconcerting calamity. And frankly, Americans, we're not used to it. Most Americans don't really think about things like this because there's this sort of, we're invincible, we're America, we're, you know, and it's been awful for me to see that. The only positive side is in all this chaos, I think, and in terms of people maybe starting to look for order, I think politically, people are going to be much more aware. And hopefully,
yeah.
The fact that the fact that there are even any people following the president now it scares me. It scares me to death. The other thing with the pandemic is it reveals that we're one of the only, if not the only, Western developed country that does not have universal health care. It was absurd. You would turn on the TV and then you would learn that the governor of New York is bidding against the governor of New Hampshire to try and get the right oxygen equipment. Unbelievable. You know, your health insurance is linked to your job. And then a lot of people, they did a poll once and they asked several Americans in mid-America, do you believe in Obamacare? And they said, oh, no, 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 no. And they said, well, what about the Affordable Care Act? And they said, oh yeah, that's great. It's the same exact act. So, you know, these sorts of things, they've always been there and we're all being hurt by them.
In this pandemic and in these times of COVID-19, what can do art for us?
I think what it always does, which is give us beauty, give us truth, and make us question things. I just think it's more pronounced now. Well, there are a lot of playwrights now that are writing screenplays. There are a lot of theater companies that are having virtual performances, and that's wonderful. That's a good thing, and that's something that would not have happened but for the pandemic. So hopefully, after it's under control, it won't be a returning back. It won't be an either or, it'll be a both and. And technology is wonderful. It's given us the ability to perform in ways and to see art in ways that it just wasn't possible. I think we probably wouldn't have thought of it. You know, poverty of imagination when everything seems to be going well. So we've changed courses. I see by the way, one of my favorite shows on television, and I love television. I love television. I don't care if people hate it, is Pose.
Of course.
I don't think that show would have been popular even 30 years ago. It's wonderful. No. It's wonderful. And part of what's wonderful about it is that it's a good show. It's a good storyline, but you get to see a well-drawn character who is not Black, heterosexual, Black, I mean, you know, Puerto Rican. It's wonderful to me. Meta-narratives, these myths that blanket the world and support the world are crashed and diminished. You know, and again, it's not just America. It's countries all over. I mean, South Africa, what they've been through in the past 80, 90 years with the pandemic on top of it, you can see all of the inequality. You can see that physically there are people that look different bodies, but structurally they're going to have some of the same problems until the past is faced. And it's both exciting, I think, when there's a lot of chaos, because good can come from it, maybe even more quickly